to Concussion Talk Podcast. I'm Nick Mercer. I write Concussion Talk, www.concussiontalk.com. This is episode 25. I'll be talking to Rowan Stringer's father, Gordon. In 2013, Rowan Stringer was playing high school rugby in Ottawa and sustained 2 concussions in less than a week. Her second concussion knocked her unconscious, and she never recovered. Rowan's parents have been pushing for greater awareness and education around concussions, especially in youth sports. Today I talked to Gordon Stringer about the changes he would like to see around how concussions and concussion management are understood. We will also talk about Bill 149, better known as Rowan's Law, passed in Ontario last year, where it is now, and the next steps. I'm on the phone now with Gordon Stringer, and I'll get him to introduce himself and talk about how he became involved in concussion education awareness, he and his wife, and about their daughter. So you could tell us, Gordon, if you could tell us about yourself and about Rowan, please.
All right. Hi, Nick. First, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on your podcast. Well, I'm a father from Ottawa, Ontario, and my daughter Rowan in May of 2013 passed away as a result of second impact syndrome, which is, it boils down to a series of undiagnosed and untreated concussions, generally in a short period of time, which resulted in a catastrophic brain injury for her. She was 17 at the time. It's been almost 4 years, which is pretty hard to believe. I was just thinking about it the other day that almost 4 years had passed. She was an active kid. Right from the day she was born, we kind of knew that we're going to have to keep her occupied. She was very different than her older sister. Her older sister came out and was very calm and collected about life, and Rowan was a little more energy, a little more high energy. Needed to get involved in things. So she, growing up, she was in soccer. She was in ringette for a long time. She played ringette 12, 13 years. Some of it at AA level, which is the highest you can get to in ringette. She played lacrosse, which was interesting here because they didn't have enough girls to make a team, so the girls always played on the boys' team. So she was generally the only girl on her team in the lacrosse area until she reached, I think it was about bantam level, and the boys started to get a little bit too big for her to be in there bouncing around with them. So she dropped lacrosse at that point. And in grade 11, she got into rugby, which was, it's a little bit late, but it was high school, and they started a girls' team, so she got involved in it at that point. She was in soccer. Snowboarding. I mean, she was
very active. It sounds
very active kid.
Yes.
In May of 2013, the events that around her death were a very short period of time. On a Friday afternoon, it was preseason for the high school teams, so they had a preseason tournament on the Friday afternoon where they played 3 shortened games.
Okay.
It was quite a warm day. We found out that during the 3rd game, she took a hit and was actually removed from the field. We didn't find this out until after everything had happened. Anyway, they did remove her from the game. She came home. She complained about having a headache on Saturday. This wasn't unusual. She was a kid that got headaches, whether it be, biological or whatever. She took Advil. The headache went away. Sunday we had a family gathering. She seemed her normal self. Didn't complain about headaches anymore. Seemed fine. Went to school on the Monday, and they had their first high school Monday rugby game. In that game, she apparently got kicked in the head at one point. Nobody saw it. She didn't stop playing. The big concern for us, which really highlights the whole brain injury area, was she had a huge bruise on her knee after that game. So this was the big focal point, was the actual big bruise on her knee, and whether or not her knee was going to be healthy enough for her to play the next game and all this kind of stuff. But nothing was mentioned about the hit to the head.
No.
She didn't talk about it. Nobody said anything about it. She did go and have a driver's test on the Tuesday, which she failed, which, looking back with 20/20 vision, was probably another indication that things weren't totally fine going on in her brain, because she was a good driver, and the fact that she failed her driver's test was probably a flag that we didn't pick up on either. She went to the game Wednesday. I dropped her off at school in the morning, and my concern again was this bruised knee. I said, maybe you should think about not playing, because that knee isn't looking very good. And she kind of scoffed at me and said, "Oh, come on, Dad, it's just a bruise. I've had them before. I've played through these kind of things. It's not bothering me." Apparently she did talk to some friends that day about thinking she may have a concussion. Wow. But one friend kind of said to her, "Well, really, if you have a concussion, you know it. So, if you're kind of questioning it, then maybe it's not there. Who knows?" They Googled concussion. Ultimately, she decided to play the game that afternoon. They had another high school game on the Wednesday afternoon. In that game, she suffered a swing tackle, which in rugby is illegal. She was running with the ball, and with her forward motion, the opposing player grabbed her by the jersey and threw her through the air. So her momentum carried her as well as the throw. And she apparently landed on her head on the ground. She sat up briefly on the field, kind of motioned her hand to her head, and then lost consciousness. She was taken to the hospital by ambulance. She never did regain consciousness. They removed a bone flap from her skull to try and relieve the pressure of the brain swelling. That didn't do the trick. And by that Sunday, she was pronounced brain dead at the Children's Hospital, and we, as per her wishes, we donated her organs so that other people could have a chance at a better life. So that's kind of the events surrounding her death.
Wow. Sorry, go ahead.
We got a call a couple of days after her death from Chris Nowinski, who is the fellow at the Sports Legacy Institute down at Boston University. They're the ones that are conducting the brain injury research on NHL athletes, NFL athletes, etc. I tell you, Chris is an amazing guy, and the people down there are pretty amazing folks. But to have his job, it's got to be pretty tough, because a couple of days after Rowan passed away, he was on the phone, and it's the fact that he has to make these kind of phone calls, and he does, is pretty incredible. But he asked us if we would be willing to allow Rowan's brain to be looked at by the folks down at Boston University Medical Center. We agreed to it, but before that could happen, the folks at the Children's Hospital here were also going to be doing an autopsy and looking at what happened. So eventually her brain tissues got sent down to Boston University. They looked at them, and that's where we got the diagnosis of second impact syndrome. They looked at at her brain and concluded that she had more than likely on the Friday and the Monday, probably a mild concussive event, or maybe slightly worse than a mild concussive event. They couldn't really tell that, but there was definite signs that the blow on Wednesday resulted in the second impact syndrome. Massive brain swelling event that took her life. So that was it was good to get a diagnosis and a final kind of cause of death. Although it's still it's pretty hard to realize that something could have been done, we think, or even if she had the knowledge herself, she could have made different decisions than she made in what transpired in the events. So it was bittersweet, but it was good to get that knowledge, and it's kind of provided the impetus for us to move forward with what we've been doing in the last little while on concussion education and awareness.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. So thank you so much for sharing it. So since that time, you and your wife have been very active in pushing for concussion education and protocols in youth sports, especially. So, how would you like to? Do you know how or where you'd like to see this addressed, like at school, at family, clubs, leagues?
Well, about 2 years after Rowan's death in May and June of 2015, there was a coroner's inquest held here in Ottawa, and out of that inquest came 49 recommendations with respect to concussions, education, awareness, and treatment. The first recommendation was for the province to create Rowan's Law, which passed last June of 2016 here in Ontario, and that law has created an advisory group, which I sit on with 14, 15 other much more learned people than myself, I must say, in the fields of medicine, health, education, and sport. And this group is tasked with providing a report this fall to the government, advising them on how to implement the 49 recommendations that came out of Rowan's coroner's inquest. Ours, meaning Kathleen and myself, our preference, or our area of importance that we would like to see is the education piece, because we feel, had Rowan had that brain health education, had that piece of knowledge, she or even some of her friends may have convinced her, or she may have convinced herself not to play that final game and to get checked out beforehand. there are a lot of tools out there from different organizations that already exist, so it's not a matter of having to go out and create things, although I'm certain that people would be able to create new and innovative education pieces, but organizations like Parachute Canada and other injury prevention organizations already have age-appropriate brain health education tools that can be introduced into a school curriculum from, probably as early as maybe even grade 3 or maybe even a bit younger than that. But just teaching kids about how important it is to look after your brain and, to be careful with it and to make sure that you tell somebody, or, if you know that one of your friends got hurt or got hit and they're not saying anything about it, to let somebody know so that they can be looked after. So education is a big point for us personally, but there are so many other areas that do need to be augmented. In the area of injury prevention, the tools, raising awareness around it, we've seen a lot of that improve over the last few years. Since Rowan died, and that's great to see. But there's also a lot of very good research going on in Canada. We have some excellent centers of research here in London at Western University and the University of Toronto. Ottawa, here we have groups here that are, across the country. Calgary has a good research center out there, people looking into it. So, but these people need to be supported, and their work needs to be, needs to continue to advance, and that's part of what needs to be talked about in the context of concussion awareness and treatment. In Ontario, we've got some very good doctors that are running concussion centers in London and Barrie, Ontario. Here in Ottawa, there's a concussion clinic, but again, it's a matter of, you need those multidisciplinary teams, those available for people to get the proper treatment. It could be a vestibular problem, it could be an ocular problem, it could be, it could be something just to do with the trauma in the brain. There's so many things that could be going on in a concussion situation that you need those multidisciplinary teams to take a look at what's going on and establish what the proper treatments are. And while we're fortunate to have some of these centers here, they still need to be supported and augmented, and having those multidisciplinary teams available for people that truly do need the help in recovering from concussions.
So well put. Thank you so much. That's just you're so right about that, and about prevention, treatment, and rest and recovery and rehabilitation. And all these areas need to be, just as you said, augmented and supported. So
yeah, for sure. But I don't want to knock what's already in place, because we do have a lot of very good people that are working on this and that are doing their very best. But I do think we need to establish centers of excellence, and there are models. One of them I like to talk about is Dr. Michael Ellis's Pan Am Clinic in Winnipeg, where the provincial government has agreed to fund and support this center in Winnipeg, where people in Manitoba, the ones that truly do need it, and it's not everyone that gets a concussion. That's another thing that needs to be communicated clearly, is that in a majority of cases, and depending upon what you look at, it sometimes it's 80-90%. That's the number that I've heard around. As long as you see a medical doctor and you follow a program of rest or slight slight bits of activity and whatever follow a recovery program, your brain can fix itself and fully recover or recover to a normal baseline in a relatively short period of time without any major kind of interventions. But then those other 10 to 20% of people that do need long-term, they have post-concussive syndrome or symptoms, and they do need more help. These are the areas like Dr. Ellis's Pan Am Clinic and Concussion North in Barrie, Ontario, and these are the centers that need to be supported so that those 10 to 20% of people that do need those extended treatments and assistance do get them. And I think that's where we really need to ultimately focus, is establishing those centers of excellence around the country where those people can get that multidisciplinary treatment that they need when they need it.
Exactly, yes. Actually, I had a question that I wanted to ask you about was, what do you think are the most important points to be taught? But as you well mentioned, that there are so many important points that need to be discussed and taught, and just awareness and mention around these points. There's not just one or two important points. There's so many, and there's so many developments that need to happen. Because as concussion has we become more aware of it in the past 10 years, whatever, there's still so much to be done. We've come a long way in these past few years, but there's still so much more work to do, and to get this education out there, and so everybody can know what needs to be done and how they need to treat their own brain, and how others need to treat their brain. So
yeah, and if we can get brain health education into the school system, I think that will help. And establishing consistent return to learn, return to play protocols around the country, and and establishing these centers where longer term treatments are needed, that have the expertise available to people that are dealing with post-concussive events and symptoms in their life.
Yes, and I think you've made those are just excellent points, and yes, I just think those are great points. I hope everyone in the country and everyone, the governments and the people with the governments with money in the hospitals, really pay attention to that, and just know that it's not just treatment and prevention and recovery. It's also education about these issues that are so important.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So thank you. I got to thank you again so much for agreeing to talk to me today, and I think the work you're doing and the recommendations that your committee comes up with will be very interesting to read, and hopefully something is noticeable is done about it. So thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thanks very much, Nick. I appreciate the opportunity. You take care.
Thank you. You too. I would like to thank Gordon once again for a very informative podcast. And I would like to thank Gordon's wife, Kathleen, and Gordon for the continuing efforts around concussion education and awareness. As always, the music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.